Hi, it's Emily with Emily Talks. Thank you for coming back over to view my video today. I want to address a few things from yesterday's video where I was talking about my panic attack and having, a difficult time, and some of the ideas that I addressed there. And this is actually something that I've thought about previously because I'm going to be talking so much about how to make positive changes in your life, how I do that in my life, and different really awesome skills. And I don't want anybody to think that I'm a professional, that I'm professionally trained, or mix up that message that I am, an overall resource on what to think or how to move forward, or that every single idea that I put out there is worthy of integration, because it's not. And I mean, that's not even really true for a professional either. But because I'm an individual who is flawed, and I'm talking about my very difficult journey with handling my mental illness, some of the ideas that I am going to talk about, and some of the experiences that I'm going to talk about, and how I have come to terms with those experiences as of right now, as of somebody who still struggles. It's going to be perspectives that I don't necessarily want other people to take on those perspectives. It's not necessarily perspectives that I'm endorsing for other people. It's just how I am particularly dealing with both the symptoms that I'm experiencing, the struggles that I have, as well as the trauma that I have experienced. So all of those things together, sometimes I'm going to share concepts that I'm not really comfortable with where I'm sitting at with them, but they're kind of works in progress that to me don't feel like they're helpful messages. Particularly yesterday, I was talking about, I don't feel that it was right that I was even born. And I want to delve into that, but I also want to first say that I'm not an expert. I'm not a professional, and sharing those kinds of ideas, I think, can be hurtful to people who struggle as I struggle, because, it comes from a very dark place for me. It comes from struggling to accept how difficult my life is and wanting to be at peace, but that sense of peace comes from surrendering. And that really ties into SI. If you don't know what SI is, you can Google that. I'm not going to mention certain words or buzz topics that can get my video flagged. So SI, I'll talk about it in the comments, so check those out, or in the description of the video. What I'm also going to include in the description, and I have done for previous videos, is a ton of super great links about the topic that I'm talking about, how to find out more information about distress tolerance or other skills that I'm going to be sharing. Today I'm going to talk about a few different subjects, and I'll try to remember to say, hey, check out the description. Regardless, though, there'll be some great stuff there for you. So please take a gander if you want to know a little bit more about what I'm talking about or where I'm coming from. And I mean, as you can see from previous videos, I'll say stuff that I really just didn't say it right. Like before, I was talking about like a fistula. I used the right word. EMDR. I didn't have the proper the proper words for that acronym. So there's going to be times where I make mistakes, and I talk about it from my perspective that's kind of incomplete and imperfect. So checking out the actual sources will be super helpful, and that's why I'm including it in the description. Check it out. So I'm gonna circle back around to the where does that thought come from that I should not have been born? So over the years, particularly with PTSD symptoms, and I talked about this in my video yesterday, is that I am not having access to my rational brain, which to me is essential for efficacy and for being able to act and make decisions and even utilize grounding skills. That has to come from some kind of rational movement of the brain, particularly when I am in a flashback that takes me back to a very young mind that is also in extreme danger, that is terrorized, is trying to flee and get away. So when I'm experiencing flashbacks, there isn't really images or a particular event that I'm re-experiencing. It's more of an age, more of like the developmental capacity that I have at that age, and then fear. So running, trying to get away, impending doom, or that intense flight feeling. So that's what's going on, and it's so hard to be in that space. When I was first developing these ideas, I was experiencing these types of flashbacks while I had my son at home with me. And I would be going through an hour-long flashback, and I would come back to myself, but it would be for a few hour stretches. I would have multiple panic attacks in the meantime because it was really easy to set me off. And my son was watching all of this, and he was exposed to it. And I guess he was 8, 9 years old, having to watch his mom go through these experiences. And it's really not cool. It's not me being in a place where I can actually care for my son. So not only was I experiencing this extreme terror, but I'm a single parent. My son was having to experience these symptoms alongside of me. And it deeply affected him. And to me, there was just this really gross injustice that was happening. And at the time, I was struggling with SI. Again, you can look up what that is. That had to do with, this isn't just. That if this is what life is for me, that this is incredibly cruel. It's cruel to my child that I cannot care for. That my potential in particular, I was working in a position that the type of work that I was doing was really exciting, but I didn't have the ability to really be present in that role. And the type of distress that it caused in my life made me really upset with myself and beat myself up a lot, which in turn made my performance even worse. It was such a nightmare. And then, I finally decided to take off work and deal with what was going on. And then I'm having these incredibly distressing symptoms that I can't even deal with my life. I can't parent my child. I can't function to eat. And this went on for months. It went on for several weeks before I got my son into a safe space because I knew I couldn't care for him. And it was just super tough. And, mental health issues, PTSD, it already adds in an element of SI just on its own. But, also being a very thoughtful person that cares deeply about ideas. And I feel that ideas mean something. it made me think about, where does this SI come from? Is it reasonable to think about what of my symptoms justify this? Because I couldn't release the idea that it wasn't the right thing for me to pursue. I still felt really deeply that my life was so terrible that it wasn't right for me to have to keep going through it. So as I was integrating that ostensible, like that very deep experience of saying, like, let's go, let's end this, with my philosophical ideas about, personal responsibility, living a moral life, achieving my goals and my values, having to, my son is one of my highest values, having to have him live with somebody else because I knew I could not physically take care of him because of the severity of my symptoms was just so damaging, so tough to deal with. So how I integrated that was a sense of, that would be me enacting justice in my life. That would be me claiming efficacy over what was going on because I could finally have control. Something about PTSD is it's really hard to know what's going to trigger, and then once it does trigger, once I'm deep into those symptoms, at least at that time, I felt that there was no way to control it. I'm learning a ton about distress tolerance, and I can't stress that enough. I felt like distress tolerance was really silly, that I couldn't really connect with it. If you take anything from my channel, know that grounding techniques and distress tolerance go a long way. At least they did for me. And I believe that it will make a huge change in other people's lives. So, if you connect with some of the things that I'm saying and you feel like there's not another option, that there's not a way through dealing with horrific PTSD symptoms, working on distress tolerance makes sure that you don't get in or at least for me, it ensures that I don't get as deep into my PTSD symptoms as I could otherwise. Typically, when I find that I'm going through really distressing turmoil, that other dysregulated parts of my life compound on it, and that it's a snowball effect. And I had been told all of these things, but what does it look like dealing with that and getting it to stop? Because everything compounds on itself, and it takes a lot of patience, of perseverance, and then slowly, gently doing these skills. I would say that the tough part really is sticking it through the worst of the symptoms. The tough part isn't actually taking out the skill and doing it. It is, because the skills are so easy. It's really just not letting the horribleness of what I experienced pull me down, so that I still felt enough hope to continue working on my skills. So, I'm going through all of this really tough experience. I came to this understanding that the way to gain efficacy and the way to gain justice was for me to act, and me acting meant, following through with SI and achieving the goal of that. And over time, I started to go further and further back with that idea of Where does the injustice come from? And who is morally responsible? So as I choose life, that is a moral choice on my part. And then all of the different choices that go into choosing life, like eating, taking care of my body, taking care of my child, you know, being productive, pursuing, you know, my talents, all of that stuff, the very core value that goes behind that is pursuing my life, is staying alive and choosing life. So, you know, when I think of moral responsibility, that's kind of what I'm encompassing there. And it stretches out into every facet of life. So, you know, I would think about, well, I'm morally responsible for, you know, ensuring that my symptoms don't come on. I'm morally responsible for being productive at work and being able to have a stable enough life to work. I'm morally responsible for my son's upbringing and making sure that he's doing well in school, and that he has friends and that he's getting out there. There's so many different things for which I'm morally responsible that the interrupt from my symptoms, it's so tough to draw the line between wanting to do good, seeing myself failing, and recognizing and honoring the fact that I am sick. So for those who don't experience mental health issues, this is something a provider told my mom when I was first being diagnosed, not as a small girl, because I was diagnosed with a lot of things when I was really little. A lot of the things that happened in my life started when, you know, before I even have memories, because I was that young. But I started becoming, I had a resurgence of symptoms when I was 19. So around, you know, late teens, early 20s, a provider came to my mom and they said, Emily is in a wheelchair and you're asking her to go upstairs. And you have to recognize sometimes that, yes, she can get up there and she can move on to the next thing, but she's not going to be able to just not be in a wheelchair and go upstairs. There's no way that somebody who's in a wheelchair is just going to get up the stairs in a wheelchair. And that, I mean, that's what accessibility looks like. And accessibility within mental health is something that's kind of a forefront of, you know, the accessibility movement, is understanding what that means for those who have mental health disabilities, making life accessible for someone like myself who has mental health issues is very different. You know, we need our own version of a ramp versus stairs. So that's kind of where that line is drawn, is, you know, I have a responsibility to myself. It's a moral responsibility to do the right thing. And these symptoms that I experience, I need to have the, you know, the equivalent of whatever a ramp is versus stairs to be able to achieve my goals. You know, before I really thought of it in terms of accessibility, though, I wanted to find out who was responsible. If I wasn't responsible, who is? And that's kind of where that idea of I should not have been born comes from. And, you know, as I talk through these videos, I'm kind of drawing these conclusions. And that's the point of journaling. So, you know, me choosing to do my journaling through YouTube, you may notice, you may not, that I am going to talk things through and come to realizations as I'm doing it. So, you know, I may sit down thinking that I'm going to talk about something and then realizing that I'm finding new information. So this is one of those moments where I'm starting to see this is more about exploring accessibility than it is about you know, if I'm not morally responsible, who is? That is kind of, you know, a false alternative that I want to maintain responsibility. And before, I came from a place of, you know, I can't be responsible because I'm so broken. Or just feeling so overwhelmed with that sense of responsibility that somebody had to be in trouble. And it couldn't be me because I'd suffered so much. So, honestly, I didn't know that I was going to review any of this information from this perspective when I started this video. So, but I'm going to continue just going over how I came to that conclusion, that it must have been that I should never have been born. During my exploration to find out why I was having some of the issues that I was having, particularly with identity and boundaries, which I later found out is codependence. Please check the description. Codependence is super huge in causing distress tolerance issues, causing issues with identity, etc. So check that out. I'm also going to talk a little bit about coda in there. I'm not going to talk about coda in this video. So one of the things that I learned was that when children develop, when their brain is developing at certain points, there is essential development that happens in certain parts of the brain that only happens during that time in childhood. Once that time has passed, whatever development that you've done, that is set in your brain, period. So most of this major development, I believe, happens up through 6 years old. There's a major point up to about 1.5. There's another major point up to like 3, and then there's another major point between like, I don't know, 4, 5, 6. So again, I could be wrong about the exact times. It's been at least a decade, more than a decade since I've read all that junk. So check the description for the actual data to find out what it is. But you know, that kind of gave me this sense of, if my brain was damaged in these first parts of life, or not damaged so much as didn't do the proper growing that was intended during that part of life, then there's no way that I could change what's going on, that I just have to accept it. As I've learned more about neuroplasticity and rewiring the brain, I didn't find it out initially through EMDR. I found out that, you know, later on over time, that even if there is certain essential formation that happens in the brain at certain times, even if that formation doesn't happen, I can still work on the neural network within my brain and neural pathways to strengthen behaviors that I want to see, and strengthen, you know, relationships between feelings and, or, you know, emotions and experiences, to change how I respond to things. So that was part of saying, you know, oh, I can't be morally responsible, is because something happened to me early on in life that messed something up. So again, even though I'm saying that these are things that have been documented, unless you were, you know, an infant and you're a sociopath, you can still change, and I can still change. It doesn't matter even if that development did not happen in a healthy manner in your brain, because you were affected at a certain age, as I was affected at those types of ages. You can still be okay. So definitely want to hand off that in that, you know, within that context. The other thing was when I became pro-choice, and I like calling this pro-life because it's a focus on life, as in on the life of the mother, on the life of the child, you know, that life first is the focus, not just, you know, bring this soul into the world. but bring this beautiful thing, which is life, which is an individual, that has so much beautiful potential, that is going to be hurt and destroyed if it's brought in the wrong circumstances. And that's, to me, really, really disgusting. So I used to be pro-life as in anti-choice, and now I am pro-choice as in what I believe now to be pro-life. So something as I was changing that idea and understanding what it means to lovingly bring a new life, a new individual into this world, it had me reviewing the choice that my parents made to bring me into this world. So I'm the 5th youngest of 6 children. There were a lot of dynamics going on, and you know, my parents, I know that they deserve their happiness, they deserve their privacy, so I'm going to be very careful on my channel to talk about things in perspective to myself, and to realize that my experiences are specific to me, and they don't necessarily explain everything that went on. It's just whatever I held on to, and whatever over the years I've reviewed as that it's not necessarily the end all be all of what actually happened, or, you know, it's just the perspective of one kid who became an adult, and me as an adult had to review all of that stuff, and everything over time just, you know, changes a lot. So I know that I may have things that impacted me a certain way that may not, you know, the impact that it had for me may not really match up with the greater scheme of what was going on. So all of those things being said, my parents deserve their privacy, they deserve their dignity, and they deserve happiness. So all of that being said, all of that preface being done, there was a lot going on in my family, you know, before I was born, that in my estimation, children shouldn't have been in that situation. And I believe that a lot of people would agree with that judgment, regardless of anything else. And, you know, nobody's perfect. And choosing to continue to have children and bring them into the situation that was happening, I feel was just a really bad decision. And, you know, in my most vulnerable and upset moments, I do make moral judgments on that. Like, I can't believe somebody would do this. I can't. How can anybody think of, I want to have a kid I love and that I cherish, and this is what I'm going to bring them into, was just so absolutely bizarre to me. But again, that comes from that false dichotomy, or that false alternative of either it's my moral responsibility to care for myself, or it's somebody else's moral responsibility that's not possible in me, instead of focusing on accessibility, which is actually what should be going on. Like if I'm having an issue achieving my goals, I need to look for how is that going to become accessible to myself, versus looking at who else can be, who can take on that responsibility because it's so injured within myself. So when it comes down to saying things like I should not have been born, that's where that all comes from, is from the different perspectives that I've developed over time. So I wanted to delve into that because I want others to see, I want you to recognize that I'm not a professional. I'm not an expert. My ideas come from, you know, me trying to do the best that I can with the life that I have. And sometimes I come to conclusions that aren't super helpful. And I may end up sharing them on my channel. And I don't doubt that that's going to be something that happens over time, because I know that I'm in a state of flux, that many of the things that I still need to deal with, I'm on that precipice, or even, miles off from feeling like it's something that I'm ready to tackle or handle or achieve, wherever that is in the process. So I've shared with you where these ideas have come from. There's going to be a ton of information that's available in the description to give you an idea of how I've developed these ideas. And I feel like there's an apology in there about talking about and endorsing my thoughts that are centered around SI. Even though I didn't necessarily talk about that in particular in my last video, I feel like it's an encouragement for other people who struggle with that to have another rationalization for why ending is the right response. And I think that's a way more complex thing than I could possibly tackle. And whatever complexities there may be there, I don't think that it's the right message for anybody who is struggling to say, that does sound like something that makes sense. I just don't want to reach out to anybody who is hurting, because my videos are meant to reach others. They're meant to make an impact in your life. And if you're struggling with feeling like you belong here, or that you have no possibility for happiness or hope because of everything that you've been through, and then you hear me say, oh, well, it wasn't even right for my parents to have brought me into this situation, that could be the message that causes you to choose, okay, you know what, that's right, and I am gonna move forward with what I need to do to end the pain and suffering. I'm still here because I have not made that decision. A lot of that has to do with loving my child and realizing what kind of harm it would cause him, that it's more important to me to go through the difficulty of becoming a better person than it is important for me to stop suffering. I don't want to continue the generational trauma. I want it to, just like every other parent, I want to give my son a better future than the adulthood that I have experienced to date. So I really wanted to share that with you and make sure that you'll understand it's important to take responsibility for my own life and the choices that I make within my life. Trying to push that off onto my parents, regardless of whatever responsibilities that they had that they did well with or otherwise. None of that has to do with my own personal responsibility to myself. And the same thing for you. You've got a personal responsibility to yourself, and that's beautiful and joyous. And the fact that it belongs to me and that belongs to you is something that's so cool, that I can come from any sort of situation and have hope. That's powerful. So all of those things being said, I'm really glad that I was able to talk through that particular statement from yesterday and make a really great breakthrough for myself, realizing that this all has to do with the false alternative between, either it's my moral responsibility or it's somebody else's, versus it's my responsibility and I need to seek the accessibility that's going to work with the skills and the capabilities that I have, instead of focusing on, if I can't do this, then there's no other way to get up these stairs with a wheelchair. It's just not the right place to look from. I look forward to connecting with you guys again. I'm going to be having some really awesome interviews coming up in the next week that I'm so excited to share with you. So I hope that you keep tuning in, and you guys have a blessed weekend. Bye.